Welcome back to another episode of the Cosmic Business Breakthrough. I am so excited to have today's guest with me. I have the amazing Cass Dunn, who is all about building confidence and ditching imposter syndrome, which I absolutely love. She's a psychologist, she's a mentor, she's a coach, she's an author, she's a podcast host. You got all the things going on. And, you know, as I've said already, probably in the intro, she hosts one of Australia's highest rated health and wellbeing podcasts, Crappy to Happy. 3 books, I think now 4 books, or is it still 3?
3 paper and an audiobook.
Audiobook. Awesome. And it's all about helping people find more meaning and joy in life, work, and relationships. And I love how beautifully this all aligns with, you know, what we do in business as well, because you are in online business too. And what we so often find is this real... We come up against these barriers in business, don't we, around confidence and imposter syndrome. And we're constantly peeling back the layers. And so I'm, so excited to be having this chat to you about all of these juicy things. And before we dive into all of that, I'd love for you to tell us a bit about your story and how you came to be teaching and writing and speaking about all of this great stuff.
Well, thank you for having me. And when I get asked this question, I haven't found a way to make it really succinct. So I don't want to bore you with the long, boring version. But I've always been interested in psychology. So right from when I left school, I kind of had an interest in psychology. But interestingly, what I was most interested in was journalism. I wanted to do journalism, but I actually wanted to be like not a newspaper journalist, like I wanted to write for Dolly magazine or Clio magazine. Like I wanted to be kind of a feature writer and write creatively. So I enrolled in journalism, and it was just all about creating like headlines for news articles. And I found it so mind-numbingly boring. It was just not what I wanted to do at all. Yep. So I don't even know if there wasn't a creative writing option at that time. If there was, I wasn't aware of it, so I just enrolled in journalism. But I also took a psychology elective, and so in that first semester, I really loved my psychology subject. So I switched. I actually took 6 months off, and I came back the following year, and I just enrolled full-time in psychology. And so I did an undergrad, and then I was not the best student. I was a bit emotionally immature at the time. I mean, I started university when I was about 16. I was very, very young. When I finished school, I probably wasn't ready for university. So I got through that first degree by the skin of my teeth. And then I went out and worked for a while. But I always had this pull, like I worked with homelessness, I worked in community services, child protection work, all that kind of thing. I ended up working with international students just by just detoured into that because I wasn't paying attention, and I just ended up working with international students. But I always felt this pull to come back and finish what I started with psychology. And I ultimately did that many years later. In between, I became a life coach. I was doing life coaching work. So there was all these sort of detours along the way, but I ultimately came back to psychology. And it's kind of really interesting to me that then just by connections and introductions, I ended up doing this work online, and I ended up writing and starting a blog and doing that writing that I'd always wanted to do before. And out of that obviously came 3 books, online programs. And to get to the confidence thing, most of my audience, most of the people I speak to are women, often working women, business women, working mothers, juggling all the things, stressed, dealing with perfectionism and people pleasing and just turning themselves into knots. And because my interest is so broad, and like I have always struggled to find a kind of niche. They tell you in business you need to find a niche, and I could never do that. So I'm talking about all the things. And so I thought, the best way to talk about all the things I want to talk about is to have a membership. So I started a membership so that each month I could talk about a different topic that was relevant to my audience. And about 12 months into that, I decided to talk about imposter syndrome. And from that, I just saw in that month, I had about 100 women in a membership. I talked about imposter syndrome. Most of them said they didn't think that that was something that really applied to them. And as soon as I started talking about how it presents and the kind of behaviors that go with it and where it comes from, all of these light bulbs went on, and they all just realized that this was exactly what they were experiencing, that this was the explanation for all of these behaviors and, unhelpful patterns, the overworking, the procrastinating, all of the things that were going on. And so from that, I thought, well, I think I've hit on something here that is really important, and that's very central to, and it really comes down to that worthiness. Ultimately, like it's that core sense of self-worth and being enough and knowing that you're enough. And I thought, if I can help women to nail this, and I know it's not just a female problem, but it does tend to present more in women.
Yes.
If I can help women with this, I reckon that there's just going to be this domino effect where all of those other problems resolve themselves. Like if we can feel enough, like all of the other things that I had talked about throughout the course of that membership, I felt like this central issue of self-worth, if we could nail that, then the other problems would cease to exist. So I just went all in with imposter syndrome and confidence, created a program, wrote an audiobook, talk about it whenever I get the opportunity.
Yes. I love it. I love it on so many levels. And I think, okay, I had to share this with you. There's so much synchronicity around at the moment because I have had 3 conversations about confidence and imposter syndrome just today. Like,
wow,
it's coming up. Like it comes up. I think it comes up a lot, but it's just like, obviously because I knew I was chatting to you, maybe it was just, in the ether around me. But I do think like this is such a big issue. It's like a lot of the things that are actually holding us back, particularly in business, are related to that feeling of not enoughness, that feeling of imposter syndrome. And that plays out like not just in our business. Obviously there's that idea that how you do one thing is how you do all the things, right? So if you feel like you don't have that worthiness in other parts of your life, that's gonna have that ripple effect in your business as well.
Yes.
So, and I also I talked to you about this before we came on for recording, but again, I need to just reflect this back. Like, it's always so interesting when I look at someone's astrology chart and what they do or what they end up doing in business eventually. Like sometimes we take a few detours along the way, but your chart is so perfectly aligned with what you do now because you have this Saturn, our planet of lessons, our karmic planet, our planet of boundaries and kind of, bringing us back to our core lessons that we need to learn this lifetime. You have that Saturn in Taurus, and it's in the 8th house. So it's in the psychological house, the 8th house.
Wow.
And in Taurus, the lesson there is all about finding your true inner worth. And that's like we talked about in terms of your character, in terms of, what your standards are, and in terms of how you're serving other people. And I think like this is exactly the kind of work that you do now. And that's beautiful. But also, you have a moon in Virgo, and Virgo moon people, Virgo tends to be that sign that is kind of known for being quite self-critical. It's like, it expects perfection, but most of all, it expects perfection in itself. Rather, like it's looking for refinement. It's looking for making things better. It's always looking for that next level of how can I make this better? And so that
it's
can
judgy
bring
and critical is what you're saying. So
yeah, it can be
in a nice way.
but it's often directed towards yourself, you know,
Yes.
especially when it's your moon. You know, it's very much about, you know, you've got to really and I talk about this a lot, you know, you've got to acknowledge your moon, because your moon is your emotions, your subconscious, you know, how you process things. And so you're natally, you know, naturally inclined to be self-critical. And often what we teach is what we most need to learn about ourselves and what we most need to integrate about ourselves. So I think like this is just another example of how astrology plays out in our work, which I have to bring up. But I'm really interested in talking about this. You know, I know you've done a lot of research on how this shows up for us as women. So tell me, like, how does imposter syndrome present? Like, what do we do if we have imposter syndrome?
So the thing about imposter syndrome, and I think this is the key, and I think I say all the time too, like we often use self-doubt and imposter syndrome interchangeably. They're actually they're both on the same spectrum, but they're at a kind of a different level of intensity. I think everybody experiences self-doubt when we're doing something for the first time. You know, when you're putting yourself out there, applying for a new job, that we all have that sort of, oh God, you know, if I've not done this before, can I do this? Will I be able to, you know, to step up and do this? That's really normal and human and widespread. When you experience that self-doubt, typically, once you start doing it and once you get you start getting the evidence that you can do it, you get some positive feedback, you see the evidence of your ability, then that bolsters your self-confidence. The difference with imposter syndrome is that the key feature of imposter syndrome is that there is an inability to internalize your success or your achievements. There is an inner narrative that says, because I guess it stems from this core feeling of not belonging, this self-concept of not being enough, then when they achieve success, it's because they just got lucky. I was just in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
I got that promotion because my manager really liked me. I got into the degree because they made a mistake on the admissions form or not enough people applied. Maybe I got the job because nobody else applied. There's this sense of it's a fluke, or I have to work really, really, really hard. So overwork, over effort, thinking is all a feature as well, because there's this sense that for me to be able to do as good a job as somebody else or what other people expect of me, if I really, really work harder than everybody else, then I can achieve it. So the thing is that success isn't internalized. It's always either just I worked really hard, not because I'm inherently capable, or I just got lucky, which means there's no confidence that that success is repeatable. So therefore, every time there's a new opportunity, there's this question mark about will I be able to repeat that success? The other key difference is that when they fail or they have a setback, they completely, with imposter syndrome, completely own failures and setbacks. It's because of me. I wasn't good enough. There's proof that I shouldn't be there. I don't belong. I don't have what it takes.
Yeah.
Always externalizing success, completely internalizing failure, which means that no matter how successful they become, no matter how much they achieve, it never really goes away, because it's not, no achievement is having the effect of kind of bolstering that inner sense of that inherent capability or experience or knowledge. So therefore it plays out in having to either, obviously perfectionism and overwork. Sometimes procrastination is the flip side of that, because if I have to do everything perfectly all of the time, everything feels overwhelming. So sometimes I just avoid and dither because I don't know where to start. There's sometimes taking course after course after course after degree, read a book, listen to a podcast, like learning more in order to feel like I know enough.
More certifications.
More certifications, more training, more study, take another course, buy another program. You know, often not asking for help, feeling like that is a sign of sort of weakness or not wanting to let on that you can't do it on your own, because that would be evidence that you're not good enough. So there's all of these sorts of patterns that play out that just cause stress and anxiety and overwhelm and burnout.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I feel that. I feel that. Like
Yeah.
everything you were saying, I was like, oh yeah, okay. Yep. Tick, tick, tick. Okay,
Yes,
cool.
right.
Yes.
And same. I feel all that.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
it makes sense for your chart.
right? And this is where I wanted to talk about it in my business once I recognized it in myself, because I thought, oh, wow. I learned about imposter syndrome 20 years ago when I was doing a master's in psychology, coaching psychology. And we talked about, and they're talking about CEOs of these big companies having imposter syndrome. And that's what I thought it was, like CEOs of big companies. And then my first book was coming out, and everybody was saying, are you so excited that your book is coming out? And all I felt was dread. Like, when this book comes out, people are going to realize it's not that great. Like, they're going to be so disappointed because they're expecting more from me. And I don't think this book is really what, I honestly think that this is going to be like, nobody is going to want to, people are going to be disappointed. They're going to realize I don't know as much as they think I do. And I went, oh my God, I suddenly realized, oh my God, this is imposter syndrome. Like this is it. And when I started talking to other people, they realized that as well.
Yeah. So that creates all sorts of like internal stress, right? Because your nervous system is constantly activated, thinking, oh, I'm not doing this right, or this isn't good enough, or I need to do more, or, you know, what are they going to think? Or, you know, all of those things are happening, which is not only going on in here, but also in your mind. It's also affecting your body, right? And so I thought it was really interesting in your latest program, which is Beyond Confident. You talk a lot about, you know, all the mindset work in the world won't necessarily fix this, because it's actually your body's now programmed to send these messages back and keep the loop going.
Exactly.
And so I'd love to know, like, you know, how do you actually, like, I mean, I'm not going to, you can't have to give it all away right now, but like,
you can join my program.
Yes. What is some of like the strategy behind shifting that stuff? You know, how do you do that?
And it's not necessarily overcomplicated. I think the problem is that most of the advice out there, when I started Googling, when I started doing my research, even the people who are most well known in the world for this work dealing with imposter syndrome, they all talk about change your thinking, like work on your mindset. And I just knew that wasn't enough. I've done all the work in the world on my own mindset. Like and I know from my clients. So I think this, now that we in psychology, you know, everybody's becoming much more aware of that whole nervous system regulation factor, and the fact that, and many people don't know this, like we have known for a long time that if you change how you think, that will have an effect on your physical body. Like if I am thinking anxious thoughts, I'm going to have an anxious physical reaction in my body. Yes. But what most people don't realize is that the 80% of the mind-body communication is from the body to the brain, not the brain to the body. So our body, like our nervous system, is sending outside of our conscious awareness. Like our nervous system is constantly attuned and sending messages up to our brain, which our brain is then trying to make meaning of. And so there's this phenomenon, I guess, called story follows state, which is the story that you're telling yourself, the thoughts that you're coming up with are actually a consequence of the messages that your body is sending to your brain. It's not the other way around. So just trying to change your story, trying to change your thinking is not going to help if your whole nervous system is dysregulated, like you said. So things like, I mean, something as simple as just like meditation, like calm, deep breathing, like just regulating your nervous system through slow breathing, through yoga, through movement, through things like EFT tapping. I mean, other therapies like EMDR is a very successful therapy. I'm not trained in EMDR myself, but, you know, like that eye movement desensitization for people who've had traumatic backgrounds, highly effective. So I think we know now too that we can resolve a lot of these issues without having to go into the trauma or go into the, you know, dig up everything from your childhood and talk about it in therapy. Like we don't have to do that anymore. We can actually just tap directly into our physical body and create that sense of safety physiologically, and that will then have a huge effect on the kinds of stuff that's coming up because then you have a chance of changing your story, like looking at your thoughts and your unhelpful thinking patterns. But if you're just working at that thinking level without doing the other work, it's always going to be short-lived. It won't stick.
Yeah, so you've got to incorporate, a little bit of both, I suppose.
Yeah.
But if you don't bring it back to the body, then it's very difficult for you to think your way out of imposter syndrome. Like it's not actually
impossible.
It's not actually a thing. And yeah, it's interesting. Like I think about people's processing, like we were talking about with your Virgo moon, right? So people who have like an air sign moon, or like Virgo is another example. Even though it's an earth sign, it's ruled by the planet Mercury, which is the mental planet, right? So often people with a moon in an air sign or with a Virgo moon, there is a lot of overthinking in terms of that's how they process. That's how I have Libra moon. That's how we process our emotions, is we think and then we ruminate and then we make it worse. We get in the loop. And something that I often say to people who have that kind of archetype in their chart is, how can you bring yourself back into your body? How can you bring yourself down? Like how can you bring the thinking from here back, and settle it into yourself? And I think that's, even though imposter syndrome can show up in probably most people, there will be some people who are more prone to it because of the style that they process information is much more is overly critical or overly mental. So that's how that's where I love that astrology and kind of psychology or coaching all kind of blends together, because I think if you can understand your style of processing, then you can also go, okay, well, if this is the way that I normally process things, how can I work with that? For instance, with meditation would be a really great thing for an air sign moon to do, to kind of calm my mental state to then affect my physical body. If you're a water sign person, being in your body is actually essential. Like if you have a water moon, coming back to your body is part of the process, because you actually process your emotions through your body. So there's maybe other things, there may be other techniques, but it's like it then can help you. Okay, which technique is going to work better for me if I understand this part of myself? So I don't know if you found that at all. Like, I mean, not specifically with astrology, but like certain things will work better for certain people, right? Depending on their natural styles.
Yeah, for sure. And, like some people will say, oh, this is how I manage stress or whatever, this is what I do. And I think, wow, like that would not be me. That's the thing. Like it's everybody's got their thing. And I'm also like, I think being an Aquarian too, I've always been interested in astrology, but probably at quite a superficial level. But I'm also now really fascinated by the astrology psychology overlap, and I've been even looking around at potentially studying astrology myself.
Awesome.
Because I think that it really, for somebody as a psychologist or a coach, I do believe that if you had a deeper understanding, like the things that you're talking about now, I find fascinating. I think that would be so interesting to be able to bring that to clients.
Yeah, I think it's such a great tool, like to understand our different ways of processing things and seeing the world, and then being able to use that information, use that awareness, not just information, but that self-awareness to be like, okay, now I know this about myself, or now I know this about my client or the situation. This is how I can work with that to best effect, because, you know, the person with imposter syndrome or, you know, a confidence issue, if they, for instance, have a lot of fire in their chart, they may need a lot more exercise, or they may need a lot more physical activity to kind of work through that type of thing, or something very physical may help them to overcome that self-doubt in some way. Like, what is it that they can draw on from that? Air sign people, maybe more meditation, but that may not work for instance, a fire sign person, because it's just not their way, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's hugely beneficial to have that level of self-awareness. But I would also love to know where you see it. Like, obviously that's how it presents itself, right? We know that, like you said, you know, this perfectionism, this overwork, this all of the things that we're constantly kind of trying to prove ourselves, just to ourselves, really, is what's happening. Is there a flip side of that? Like, you know, there's a lot of talk now these days about narcissism, right? In the workplace. Would that be like the flip side of, you know, if you are confident, do people like, do you come across as narcissistic then? Like, is that like a thing? I don't know.
That's an interesting question. So narcissism is, again, it's talked about a lot. Like, it almost feels like every other person.
It's all out there right now, right?
It's a narcissist. It is a thing. Narcissism can sometimes, like when I studied psychology way back, well, I mean, truthfully, the research into narcissism has only really been it's exploded in the last decade, let's say. We're getting more understanding of what it is, how it presents, what causes it, etc. When I first studied psychology, way back, when I first left school, it was all about how narcissism was really like a compensation for low self-esteem. Like, if people had felt really bad about themselves, then they would put on this narcissistic kind of front.
Yes.
I think we know now that actually some narcissists actually do believe they're all that. I mean, they actually, it is not that they have low self-esteem. They actually...
It's not the flip. Yeah.
It's not. They actually just really believe they have a sense of entitlement. They're better than other people. Other people are only there to serve them, to prop them up, to boost their self-image. They will discard people as soon as they know, you know, of no value to them anymore. But I do think that you raise a good point, that I think people who struggle with confidence have that fear that that they will become...
I can't do this because then people will think I'm a narcissist. Or, you know?
They lean too heavily on, you know, being humble, and that humility doesn't serve them well. I remember doing my strengths profile. You know, I think anything that helps deepen your level of self-understanding is a useful thing, whether it's astrology or whatever, it's any other personality kind of profile. And I did my strengths profile, and one of my top 5 signature strengths was humility. And I've been doing a lot of meditation, studying a lot of Buddhism, you know, all of that. Like, there's no special people. We're all on the same playing field, you know. And I said it to a mentor of mine, and she said, oh, just be careful of that one, because you overplay humility and it can lead you to like undervaluing yourself. And she said, if you're in business, you can't have too much humility, because you've got to self-promote. Like, you've got to, you actually have to put yourself out there, and you have to kind of try to squash a little bit of that kind of inclination, I guess, to stay, to be the humble one all the time. And so I think it's really important to be able to find a healthy balance there. But I think when we come back to, you know, really cultivating that strong sense of self-worth that can be calm and steady and centered and like strong, but that isn't contingent on, that isn't concerned about other people's feedback or approval or opinion, well, then you can find that healthy balance, I think, where you can present yourself confidently without overdoing it and without underselling it either. You know, it's, I guess that's what I'm trying to instill in people.
Yeah. Do you think that some of that comes from, okay, that getting that balance, right? Especially in business where we have, you know, we often come to business from other careers often, you know, like we've been in the corporate sector, or we've, you know, been in the service sector in some way, where the humility and the kind of, you know, I won't talk myself up, I'm one of the team kind of thing, you know, environment thing happens. And you come into business and you've kind of got to put yourself out there a little more than you're probably comfortable with for a number of people. For some people, it feels quite good to be out there, especially for the more extroverted people that, you know, are comfortable with networking and all that kind of thing. But you come into this and then you need to find that balance of humility versus being on show. There's narcissism, exactly.
Yeah. Two extremes.
Yeah, those extremes. And also you have to, and you often then go into it kind of, because you're not sure of yourself. I think a lot of people come into especially online business, and they go, well, she's doing that or he's doing that, so I'll do that, right? And they're copying or they're emulating somebody else's business strategy, you know, style, whatever it is. And what I think, like what you say is that, you know, the more you can get that self-awareness and that understanding of who you are and what your strengths are, the more you can present that more balanced, you know, confidence. Yes. And the more you can feel that internal sense of self-worth because you understand your strengths. You're not just trying to emulate somebody else's strengths. Do you see that play out with the people that come through your programs? You know, not only they're working through their kind of nervous system regulation, but is that part of it as well?
Yeah, 100%. So throughout the program, we go through, you know, there's all these stages of what it is, how does it present. So people start to actually recognize their own patterns and how this is playing out. And then we talk about we talk about the family of origin stuff, not in a lot of detail, but it helps people to understand, oh, I see why this is a thing for me because of the messages I grew up with, because of the society and culture and especially women and all of that. I can have an understanding of that. The nervous system stuff, like being able to manage that. And then really we get into who are you? What do you stand for? What are your values? What are you about? Like it's almost like creating, your kind of personal brand that is uniquely you, that is not what anybody, based on what anybody else expects or any other messaging, like what feels good for you. How do you want to show up? How do you serve? How do you contribute? And I think that's a really that how do I contribute is a really important thing too, especially for people with imposter syndrome. I was talking to a client just the other day and she was like, oh God, you know, there's this fear that if I'm out there speaking about something that there's an expectation that I'm the authority on that, and what if somebody questions me or challenges me, or how that would be so humiliating. I mean, I've been through that as a psychologist in media, you know, like, oh God, another psychologist who's going to tell me that this is all wrong. And we come back to that idea of what about if you don't have to have all the answers? What if you're just contributing to the conversation? You know, what if you can, and what if it's a back and forth and a dialogue and you're just putting in your bit? And if somebody else disagrees, that's okay, because it's just a dialogue. And that can really help people to drop that fear and that expectation that they have to know everything. But yeah, so how do I want to contribute, and what feels good for me and what feels natural for me? Because then I can disengage from criticism and praise and other people's feedback and expectations, and I can just show up more authentically, and that's confidence. You know, when I can trust in myself that I'm just being me and showing up as me, and have my integrity intact. You know, like what I believe inside is what I present outside, you know, there's that alignment, then that is confidence. Like I don't have to worry about what anybody else thinks about me if I can feel comfortable in that.
Yes, absolutely. That's it. And that's what I notice, you know, in the work that I do as well. It's like as soon as you get that clarity and understanding of, oh, this is who I am and this is how I present and this is what feels really in integrity with you know, who I am, and so I can talk about this thing because that feels good. Like that doesn't, I know that I am contributing to the conversation. I'm not the guru. I'm just,
yeah, exactly.
You know, I'm just contributing my version, and this is how I fit in, and this is okay. This is what feels natural to me. Then the confidence comes. It's like, of course, this makes total sense. You know, of course, this is what I've been, you know, this is my work in the world. You know, that makes sense. It gives you that sense of clarity around who you're being and how you can show up more authentically. And you're not trying to, because if the longer the time you spend trying to copy someone else, or not necessarily copy, but like, you know, emulate another person's business, then the less confident you'll feel because you're never going to be that person.
Yeah, exactly.
You're always going to be you.
And it feels out of alignment. And I think that integrity thing is so important because at the root of imposter syndrome is the feeling that I'm a fake or a fraud, that how I feel on the inside doesn't match up with how other people perceive me. And whenever there is that gap, then I'm left feeling like I'm a fake. And so the coming back and being in integrity and closing that gap is really key. Like that's at the root of it, I think.
Yeah, I love that. Brilliant. So is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with around finding their confidence or ditching imposter syndrome, or, you know?
Obviously, sign up for my course. No, I'm joking.
Obviously.
Well, as a matter of fact, obviously I did create a program, and it's not even open at the moment, but it will be. I plan to keep it open a lot this year because I never got to do it last year. But I also wrote an audiobook. So the Audible original is called The Imposter Solution. And it is essentially like, it's my walking through exactly what you and I have just talked about, like this 5-step framework that I sort of created, which I think, you know, goes deeper than a lot of that superficial mindset kind of stuff that you'll see out there. And for some people that just might be a really, really helpful. It might be enough. But then obviously I have the program where we have more like live calls and we can talk through and we can practice some of the skills together and all of that. But the Imposter Solution launched this week globally on Audible. So it's an Audible original.
Awesome.
If you are an Audible subscriber, you download it for free. You don't need to use a credit. If you're not an Audible subscriber, just take a 30-day free trial. Just, you know, still download it for free and then just don't renew. It's fine.
It's fine. I love
free.
Audible.
It's free. Yeah, I love Audible. Yeah. So that's out there. And then I think, I guess my advice is really just to, for anybody who has felt that the mindset stuff, like challenging their thoughts, or the advice that's out there, like, oh, just look at all of your achievements and let that boost your confidence. Well, if you don't internalize your achievements, that doesn't help. Fake it till you make it. If you feel like a fake every single day, that doesn't help. And if all of that advice has not helped, and you think that there is something more, then that's not your fault. Because I think that can help have people even feel worse about themselves. Like, God, like,
oh, I can't get this. Yeah,
I still can't fix it. Yeah, right. So then just understand that maybe there is something deeper. There is still a solution. And it's not anybody's fault if that advice hasn't stuck, if those techniques haven't stuck, and maybe you just need to look a little bit deeper.
Yes.
But it can be resolved. And just
That's
back yourself.
Really good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it can be.
It's really good to know. And
it's always going to be a work in progress, obviously. But I think that you know, people make really significant transformations once they really start to understand what's going on, and you know, come at it at from different levels, you know, at different levels, not just trying to think their way out of, you know, self-doubt.
Yes. Brilliant. All right. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, or not all of it, some of your wisdom with us tonight. And yeah, I will put all the links to check out Cass's amazing program and book and all the things in the show notes. Yes, but thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing people's feedback on this episode too, because I'm sure that, you know, a lot of people have, I know a lot of people that I work with certainly have that feeling of, you know, I'm going to get found out, or, you know, it's never enough. All of that stuff comes up so frequently in the sessions. And knowing that there is a way that, knowing first of all that you're not alone, you're not the only one going through this, is quite common, and that you can't just think your way out of it is really powerful. And then finding out the strategies and tools that will work specifically for you and your type, you know, your processing type or your personality, will be super beneficial to really like giving you that boost in business as well as life in general. So very exciting times. Absolutely. Lots of changes ahead. Lots of stuff happening.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this, because it's obviously my favorite topic at the moment. And wherever I can spread the word, I'm really grateful for the opportunity.